Hi, this is Armin Shimerman, and this is the Shuttlepod Show.
My partner makes me put on a Quark episode to make her feel better when she's not feeling well.
I thought you were going to say something
I don't know where this was going to go.
Yes, I've seen that fiction.
You too?
Yeah.
Gonna go and do my convention thing. Got my costume on going now. Yeah, we're having a ball. It's Star Trek, y'all. Hey, down the border. Beam me up.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Shuttlepod Show. Today we have very special guest, Armin Shimerman. We'll be answering your fan questions, doing some Star Trek trivia, finding ourselves on Connor's remote island, and much more. As always, our Patreon members get a full extended version of this. I'm Erica LaRose, but before we move on, we have a special message from Andrew Robinson.
Like, subscribe, and join us on Patreon.
Thanks, Andrew. That's great. And now for your hosts, Connor Trenier and Dominic Keating.
Hey
guys.
Hey.
Hello, love.
Nice to be back. How are you?
Good,
Nice
how
to
are
see
you?
you.
Very good.
Nice to see you.
How's
Wash
Pinch?
doesn't look so good.
Pinch doing okay?
He looks
doing
washed
well.
out,
He's-
mate.
Got a
Honestly.
sweater for the weather.
He doesn't like feta buckers.
Mark, you got to put him in some sunlight, mate. Oh.
So we have been getting messages from a tree specialist, someone who has identified what he's struggling with.
He's struggling to be a tree, is what it is.
He's got a little bit of a mite.
Oh, has he?
Yeah, and so we've been given the lesson how to get rid of the mites and how to give him about a month to get healthy again.
They're not catchy, are they?
No.
And then otherwise we're going to go with plastic, right? We're going to go with plastic wash.
plastic wash.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to do that. We are not going to do
We'll
that.
have to get a Tiffany's painting of Wash over here.
Yeah,
He might miraculously turn into an orchid overnight.
right?
He'll be okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Treks and Trekkers, welcome back to the Shuttlepod Show. We are beyond thrilled to have with us today actor, director, author, activist, a bunch of other A letters that we could say about Armin Shimerman.
Which also starts with an A.
Yeah, that's right. We have an Armin. And thank you so much for
Wait a
coming on
minute,
the
I'm
show.
figuring it out.
Pleasure to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Armin,
Thank you.
God bless. Nice to have you here, bud. You were wondering how we got you.
Yes, how did you get me here?
We have a seance on Fridays.
Well, we call it your flip phone.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you still, I lost mine snowboarding in Mammoth. Show me.
Oh, I can't wait to see
I have
this.
it.
I mean, it is a decade ago now. Shut the front door.
my God.
Wow.
That's my phone.
What
So
is-
don't text me, and
How have you lived?
easy, very easy.
No
The
kidding.
way I did in my 20s and 30s and 40s.
You're married, right? So you don't need to get laid.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I will answer that off camera.
Well, I figured that. It took me a while to figure that one out. Unless you text, it's not happening, honey.
Hmm?
Oh my gosh. Anyway, we're off the path.
Yeah, what a great start. So you were born in New Jersey.
I was born in a small town, yes.
Lakewood.
Lakewood, New Jersey, which is a couple of miles west of Asbury Park. I spent a lot of time as a boy in Asbury Park and on the beaches there, or the shores, we call it in New Jersey, in the Pines, which are notorious for people who walk around barefooted, which I'm sure I did. It was a very small town, and it was an incredibly good childhood, but it was a very poor childhood.
Right. And your dad was a house painter, wasn't he?
My dad was a house painter. My parents
blue-collar
got
man.
divorced when I was 7,
Oh, really?
and my mother took on multiple jobs in order to support myself and my brother. And I didn't know how poor we were until I grew up. And it is amazing to me always that I am now sitting here considering where I started.
Yeah.
I had a very rich but meager childhood where I became interested in language, not in acting at all, but in small-time life. That I became cosmopolitan is still a mystery.
It's incredible how that, how it's instilled in someone just from birth, I think, and it comes out, or it's brought out, or it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, my father was an immigrant. My mother was the daughter of immigrants. a lot of my father's family were wiped out in the Holocaust. My mother's family escaped that somehow. But I lost multiple aunts and uncles in the Holocaust.
Were you raised Jewish, or
yes?
Yeah,
I was raised very Jewish. The expectation was that I would be a rabbi.
No kidding.
And I gave that up after my bar mitzvah, actually.
I was going to say, I mean, in Jewish families, at least one of them, much like Irish Catholics, someone's getting ordained.
That's right.
Or apparently going into the entertainment business.
Right. Just the same thing, I think.
It's like, which son's which?
Did you not know what you didn't have, as it were, growing up?
No. I remember having a cardboard belt. I remember my shoes needed to be repaired constantly. The kids I went to school with early on, especially when I just moved from the farm, because I grew up I spent first 7 years on a chicken farm. And so when we moved into the small town, my fellow schoolmates made fun of the way I looked. My clothes were really poor. And of course, we were all about the same size then, but they all grew up and I didn't. So.
Wow.
That's tough start, mate. And you were 15 when you came out. So was it mum and the kids?
Mom did a very heroic thing.
Yeah.
Very heroic thing, for which I'm enormously grateful. My mother, who knew that her oldest son, I am the oldest, needed to go to college, wanted to go to college, but she couldn't afford college. Out of the question. We were living in New Jersey. Princeton was certainly out of the question. Rutgers was out of the question. Those were state colleges. The New York schools, Connecticut schools, Pennsylvania, they were all too expensive. She found out that the UC system, that's University of California, had a very inexpensive tuition. But to take advantage of that low tuition, you had to be a resident of California for 2 years.
Right. So she uprooted you all. And
she put us all in a Volkswagen Bug. I don't know how she did
wow.
it. She took everything that she had and all we had and crammed it into that Bug.
You drove across
and drove by herself across the country and landed in Santa Monica.
What was this?
I went to high school in Santa Monica.
1960-ish or?
Yeah, 1965.
Wow.
So you could go to the UC and get good tuition.
Yes, and it never occurred to anyone, certainly not to me and certainly not to my mother, that I would go anywhere else. We didn't know that you could be rejected from a UC school, but of course I wasn't. And I went to UCLA, where I was an English major and learned about Shakespeare.
Was there any connection to LA or Santa Monica?
Yes, my mother had an aunt that lived in Santa Monica, and we lived with that aunt for about, I'd say 2 months. And then my mother found a place in West LA around Pico and Robertson, which was out of the Santa Monica High School jurisdiction. But I so liked going to that high school that I snuck into Santa Monica High School for 2 years. I would take the bus, and it would take me half an hour by the local transportation to get to Santa Monica, and I would go to school, and then I would take the bus back.
You're not registered?
No. The only registration they had was my mother's aunt's house, and that was the registration. And I must, early on, when my English teacher convinced me to become an actor, he saw me one night after rehearsal sitting on the bus bench waiting to cast the bus. And he said to me, where are you going? I'll drive you home. And everything in me went, no, I can't tell him that because he'll know I live 10 miles, 12 miles away from school. And I said, I'm going to my grandmother's house. And he said, where does your grandmother live? And I told him where we lived. He drove me there. And on subsequent nights, he saw me and he knew what was happening after a while. He said, do you need a ride to your grandmother's house? Yes.
So did you know you were an actor then?
He cast me in leads, so he must have known I had the potential to be an actor. And
I was thinking of the quick thinking. You know?
Yeah. And I was in that first encounter. I was the lead in The Crucible for him. I was playing John Proctor,
right.
And then I subsequently went on to play Claudius for him and Mr. Antrobus in
Skin of our teeth.
Skin of our
Skin
teeth.
of our teeth.
Yeah.
Well done, sir.
Yes, well done.
1 point to us.
That's right. It must have been kind of, one, I imagine, a bit of a shock moving from small town New Jersey
It
to
was.
the wide open ocean of Santa Monica.
What was Santa Monica like back then? Was it a bit slightly beleaguered
Everybody went surfing.
coast?
Everybody, as soon
Everyone
as
was
the
surfing.
3 o'clock bell rang, everybody took their boards or they put on their suits and they all went to the beach. The beach was literally across the street from the high school. And so everybody went to the ocean. I was part of the school band, so I was playing my trumpet for a while. And my teacher, Mr. Jellison, cast me in the Crucible. And I was sort of maneuvering between those two areas and eventually had to choose. They said to me, you have to choose. Either you picked a theater or you picked the band. And I chose a theater.
All right. And you're about 16 or something now?
16, 17
Yeah.
at this point. Yeah.
Was it just a general interest in trying out the drama department, or was there?
No, girls. It was girls.
That's why I became an actor.
Exactly.
I was already ahead of you.
Yeah. I got to be around more girls
Yeah.
and actually got to interrelate with girls in the theater department. Then I
Couldn't surf.
Yeah. And then the trumpet, section that I played in was all guys. So this was a much better.
Yes,
much better.
absolutely.
Did you take to it immediately, fish to water? Like,
Yeah,
this
I
is
think
what I like?
every actor has had that moment where they realize this is something special. And I remember being in a performance of The Crucible where I came off stage. I'd been on stage for about 40 minutes and came off stage and could not remember what the last 40 minutes were about. I only know that I was so involved in the character that everything else had faded away. And so when I came back to being Armin, I couldn't remember what I had done. I knew I'd been John Proctor for 40 minutes.
Right.
Ultimately, completely John Proctor.
That's full consciousness, isn't it?
Yeah.
And full being. And
that ability to
remarkable.
get out of oneself, that ability to matriculate into somebody else was so delicious, so wonderfully intoxicating. It became my drug of choice for the rest of my life.
Did you sense the audience too, that you had them there in the palm, as it were, or did you feel that power? Or
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great
That's part
play
of
and a
the
great
mix.
part. And when you get the opportunity to play those kinds of roles where it's total silence, every stage actor knows there's two wonderful sounds: the sound of laughter when you get a joke, and the sound of complete silence from the audience, because they're watching every move you make. They're so involved in what you're doing, and that is the pinnacle of what every actor tries to achieve. Now, there are other things to look for, other things to achieve when you're on stage, but that ego gratification is one of them.
yeah, not bumping into the furniture is the other one.
That's right. And die behind the couch if you're going to die on stage.
sit whenever possible. That's what Gil goes in pieces of words of advice, weren't they? Darling, sit whenever you can.
And it sounds like
I try not to do that because then I really get short.
But it sounds like you had in your drama teacher a real
A wonderful man.
who guided you and put you in roles that were going to challenge you.
Yes, you need someone like that to convince you that you can do it. And he did convince me of that. And not only was he my drama teacher, he was also my English teacher. And so he instilled in me a great love for literature as well. Mr. Jellison was one of those great men that every one of us has, or women for that matter, that instills in you to try to achieve your potential.
And a ride home.
And arrive home.
And arrive home.
At a good hour. At a good hour.
Was he a part of you deciding to go to UCLA?
No.
No.
My next important teacher was a UCLA professor who was enormously instrumental in not only my life, I can tell this story, I think, but also in Patrick Stewart's life.
Oh, what's that connect?
Okay. So I went to UCLA, and my Shakespeare teacher was David Rhodes, who I had 5, 6, 7 classes with. And I was in my senior year. I needed to take a final exam for my last class with him. And I had an audition for a prestigious Shakespeare festival in San Diego called the San Diego Old Globe. And I really wanted to do that. But it turned out my audition for the Globe was also at the same time, same hour, that I needed to take this final exam for Dr. Rhodes. Excuse me, can't call him Dr. Rhodes, David Rhodes. He asked me not to call him Dr. And I was perplexed. I really wanted this audition, but there was a conflict. And I girded my loins, and I went to David and said, is there any way that I can take the test another time? And David had seen me perform half a dozen plays at UCLA and had been a dramaturg in one of the plays. And he very nicely said, you're an actor, and I am going to let you do this.
Oh, bless him.
And the outcome was, I believe there were about 800 applicants for 8 positions at the Globe. And I was lucky enough to be one of those 8 people. And the rest is history.
That's a formative moment, that, isn't it? When you get picked out of a crowd like that.
But I wouldn't have had the opportunity. I wouldn't have been picked out if my professor hadn't have, and we came back. He came back and gave me the test. I was the only person in the room.
Mm.
And he took an hour to let me take the test.
Awesome.
He didn't have to do that.
Right.
He was just kind enough to do that. And for that, I'm enormously grateful. Now, let's skip ahead to Patrick Stewart. Okay. David had some money from his family. And what he used to do for years was invite English actors over to UCLA to work with students in various capacities. One such year, he invited Patrick to do something. And Bob Justman, who I know you know was one of the producers of Next Generation and of the original Star Trek as well, I don't know why, saw Patrick in a classroom situation. And he came back to Roddenberry and said, I think I found our captain.
No kidding.
And
they were looking at that time. That was the time they were looking.
Yeah, that's when they were looking for Picard. And Patrick got cast. And as I understand it, for 6 months, Patrick lived in David's house while they were shooting the first half a year of Next Generation.
And Patrick was kind of a workaday British.
He was a well-respected, jobbing, actor at the National. Rode his Norton to work. He was a £500 a week, and got to play Polonius maybe.
And Shylock.
And a couple of, good parts. But other than that, he did some spear holding too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but he was, I saw him at that time in the 80s, in the early 80s. He was, he was in those casts.
Right.
But, wasn't aspiring to play anything more than, yeah.
I first saw him in graduate school when he was a part of the cast of the John Bartlett. John Barton, the Shakespeare, the brilliant.
Yes, brilliant. If no one has ever seen it, if you're interested in Shakespeare at all, watch John Barton on YouTube, the Mastering Shakespeare it's called.
And look at his sweater.
Yes, look at his sweater.
What's up with the sweater?
It's huge and everywhere.
It's
he's
professorial.
It's very professorial.
Yeah. He's fuzzy and furry.
Scream Shakespeare.
And John Barton, without doubt, I think everybody will say this, and he's just recently passed away. John Barton was the absolute expert on Shakespeare. Just knew more about Shakespeare and how to perform it than anybody else.
More than McKellen?
Taught McKellen. And McKellen is one of the young men in Mastering Shakespeare. When you see the TV show, McKellen, a very young McKellen, a very young Patrick Stewart, a very young David
Suchet.
David Suchet.
Right.
Wonderful actors who are in their 20s and 30s when this TV show was shot.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's like Sesame Street, but for
for nerdy Shakespeare people.
That's me. I'm a nerdy Shakespeare fan.
It's also true that the old Globe there's a lot of Star Trek connection there too. I think Jeffrey Combs did the same thing.
That's right, yes.
He went down after he was done at the University of Washington's program. And didn't Andy say that he'd also...
Where is it located? Is it down
It's in the park in San Diego. It's in Balboa Park.
Right.
And it was a breeding ground for some wonderful actors. It also, for years, had Jack O'Brien as the artistic director, who is one of Broadway's premier directors and brought a lot of shows from San Diego to Broadway.
How long did you live down there?
Just a summer.
Just the summer.
And it was a very influential summer because I thought that I would spend the rest of my life in San Diego doing Shakespeare at the Globe. There was a wonderful actor named John McMurtry, who was my role model. I thought, if I can be John McMurtry and spend all this time in the Globe, I've died and gone to heaven. And while I was there were a lot of New York actors, and they all said to me, "You need to go to New York. You need to go to New York." I said, "No, I'm going to live here in San Diego and work here for the rest of my life." Something terrible happened that was wonderful.
Funny how that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened?
We all have these stories. This is mine.
Yeah.
I was understudying a part, and I can't remember the actor's name, and forgive me if he's still around. Forgive me that I don't remember your name. But he got a TV pilot towards the end of the season. And the artistic director said to me, "We've seen your work. Usually we would get another equity actor, professional actor, to replace the actor that's leaving. But we like your work so much, we're going to put you in that part," for which I was ecstatic.
What was it?
I was going to play Sir Hugh in Merry Wives, and there were two other parts I was going to play, but Sir Hugh specifically. And we were doing Richard III in that festival, that season. I had a costume change. And I've been doing this part now for 3 months. I went up to my dressing room, which was the apprentice dressing room, which was all the way in the back. And I got out of my clothes to make the costume change. And while and one of the pieces of the costume were hanging together by a thread. And I'd been so careful for a month and a half about not tearing this one thread. So I got out and thought, I never have to get in this costume again because I'm moving on to other parts tomorrow, the next day. So I took the costume off. I was all alone in the room, and I burst the thread. I jumped up and down on it like a mad Rumpelstiltskin. I just never have to worry about this piece of again. And as I'm doing that on the monitor, I hear some actors doing a scene that I'm supposed to be in that costume.
Oh, no.
Right then and there.
Right then and there. And I am miles away from the stage. And I can't get back. I've just torn this thing to tatters, so I can't get back in it. I'm flabbergasted.
Heart pounding.
Yes, heart pounding. Oh my God! Boom, boom, boom! What the do I do? Yeah. And I scramble. I put on my other costume. I think, I'll run down in this. And by the time I got to the stage, the scene was over. And the actors came off and gave me, the fisheye. Where the were you? And I had nothing I could say.
They danced, though. They managed to have it,
yeah. And that afternoon, the artistic director, who was Craig Knoll, he called me into his office, and he said, if we didn't need you to take over these 3 roles, I would fire your ass today. Because I was the apprentice. I was a low man on the totem. Right.
To which you replied, "Well, you need me."
Yeah. I wish I had the grace to say that. I wish I had said that. But I walked out of the room knowing full well I would never work in this theater.
Oy vey.
Oh, wow.
And so I decided maybe these guys are right. Maybe I should go to New York.
I once had to do a scene with a whole scene about a knife in a prison setup. And I went to the props table to get the knife to go on. The knife's not there. No knife. Nothing looks like a knife. There's no knife. I did a whole scene about having a knife with no knife.
Did you hold it?
What did you do?
It was talking about the fact that I had it secreted on my person. Yeah, and the 2 other actors, one was my cellmate and the other was the guard, who I was meant to put the knife to his throat was just looking at me like,
I promise you, I have a knife.
What are you going to do now?
Yeah. And I'm like, I've got a knife. I'm sure because we were talking in London jargon because it was an Indian guard cell guy. And it was honestly one of the worst moments of my life.
Yes, pounding.
So I moved to New York. Be a theater actor forever, and then what happens?
So I moved to New York, and again, gods, fates are incredibly kind to me. I am the luckiest person you will ever meet. I have been lucky all my life, enormously lucky. I go to New York, and within about 6 or 7 months, I have an audition for the Public Theater, which is the Joe Papp Theater. And I won't tell that story. Let me move ahead. I'll move ahead.
I'm intrigued.
All right. Okay. How much time do you have?
Easy.
All the time in the world.
So So I brought in to do what's called a general audition. They just want to know who you are and what can you know, let's see what you do. So I'm brought in to audition for the Public Theater. They tell me you need a classical scene and you need a modern speech. Not a scene. You need a classical speech and a modern speech. At that point in time, I have mastered one of Richard of Gloucester's speeches from Henry VI, Part 3. And
forsooth, my lord.
I'll hew my way out with a bloody axe.
All right.
And so I have that prepared. And I have another piece from Soroyan, Hello Out There, that I'm going to do as my modern piece. And I'm running through the lines as one does, getting ready for the audition. I have not ever met the casting director. Now, the Richard piece, Richard of Gloucester, is of course a hunchback, and I hunch up my shoulder, and I limp when I do it, and I'm going over the lines. The casting director comes out and says, "Armin, how nice to meet you. Gugliotti, I can't remember his first name. I'm something Gugliotti." And the man has a hunchback and limps. Now, I'm 25 years old.
We should stop. No, we shouldn't.
And I look at him and I think,
caught you unawares. Is he
I
taking
can't
the
do
piss?
this. I can't do this. I can't. I can't. I can't do it, Richard. and
That's not fair.
Right.
And I walk in, and he says, "So what are you going to do for us?" I said, I'm going to do Claudius from Hamlet." So I do Claudius, and he's pleased with it.
Did you have it backed up? I mean, you were.
I had done Claudius in high school from Mr. Jellison.
But it's been a while.
Yes, it's been a while, but I still had the lines, and so I do Claudius, and then he says to me, "Do you have anything else classical you can do?" And I think, I can't do the Richard.
He's seen you.
I can't do the Richard. So I do Puck. That's easy for me, especially at 25. And I do Puck, and he's impressed by that. And he says, "Do you have anything else?" And I think, fuck it, I can't do the Richard. and there was something else. I did something else. I can't remember.
You didn't do it.
I never did the Richard. And he never asked me for the modern piece either. Now, fast forward. This is that I was going to jump that. Fast forward to 2-3 months later. They're auditioning Threepenny Opera for Lincoln Center, which the Public Theater was the producer of. And for those who don't know, if you're auditioning for a Broadway show, it really helps if you have Broadway credits.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hire you unless you have Broadway credits. So this was a Broadway show. And but this show, Threepenny, was being directed by a very avant-garde director named Richard Foreman. And Richard Foreman, for the parts that I was being considered for, didn't want anybody with any credits.
Oh.
He just wanted people with very unique faces. And because Mr. Gugliotti remembered my audition, and because he remembered I had a very distinctively different face, he brought me in, and I auditioned for Richard once, and then they brought me in again to audition for Joe Papp. And so within 9 months of arriving in New York, I was doing a Broadway show.
Wow.
Which was a huge success. For those of you who are familiar with Broadway, or even for some of you who aren't, you all probably have seen the poster of Raul Julia as Mac the Knife. And that was the production.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was a big step.
It was a huge success. And I was trapped in that for a year and a half. Trapped because I was playing Hunchback. And after a while, my shoulder and my limp got very tiring after 8 shows a week. So.
Do you guys know the Michael Gambon story when he auditioned for Larry Olivier's RSC first thing? He goes up in front of Olivier and Larry says, "So what have you got for me?" And he said, "Richard III." And Larry had just had massive success playing the part. Really? Which part? well, the King, Richard. The King. And anyway, so he gets into it. He thinks he's going to pull a move, and there's a piece of sort of pillar prop on the thing, and he twizzles round to go into the thing, and his ring catches on a nail. And suddenly he's dripping blood. Anyway, and that's when Olivia goes...
And Olivia says, "How do you do that? I want to learn how to do that."
Yeah. What's the blood? So you finish up on this wonderful...
Yes, and then I had 3 more.
Broadway.
I had two more Broadway shows, one that didn't quite make it to Broadway. So I did Broadway shows right after each other, one after another, after another. And the last Broadway show I did was one with Richard Rodgers.
Wow. So how does telly come around? How does the camera get in?
How did I get seduced by the dark side of the Force? Can we say that here?
Yes, you can. Say anything you want.
My agent called and said, "There's an audition for a TV pilot," and I auditioned. I heard Andy say this, and I want to echo it as well. I only thought of myself as a theater actor. I never thought that I would do film or TV. I looked at myself in the mirror and went, "They don't cast people that look like me." If you weren't somewhat of a handsome leading person, whether male or female, you didn't see a lot of people that looked like me on TV and film. I mean, there were some, but very few. And so I never thought that would be my career. But I had this audition and went back. I did it in my lunch hour and went back to the play. And about 10 days later, the agent called and said, "They want to see you in Los Angeles."
Oh, do you remember what it was for?
Yeah, it was for a pilot called Bulba that never went. I met one of my dearest friends, who I think you both know, who worked on Star Trek quite a bit, Greg Idson.
Oh, right.
Gregory Idson.
Right.
Gregory and I did this pilot together, and some other people as well. And
what sort of show was it?
It was a comedy about State Department. Unfortunately, after
could have gone forever.
After we shot the pilot, it was just the time that I believe, was it the Iranians or the Iraqis? I should know this. Captured the people during the Carter administration.
Iran.
Yeah. And the network decided portraying State Department people as fuck-ups at this moment in time was not a good idea.
Right.
So the show was canceled. But they paid me, They paid me, I think, $7,000 to do the pilot. And I had never seen that money. Even with all my Broadway shows, that was astronomically more than I made on Broadway. And I went back to my girlfriend, Kitty Swank, and said, "I think we should move to Los Angeles. we should try it anyway. We should give it a 6-month try." Remembering that I'm from LA. So it's not that hard for me to move to LA. I've got family back there. And
Kitty was an actress too.
It's always an actress.
Always,
There's no was to it. She is. Right. My wife is incredible. She's. I hope I'll get an opportunity to tell you all the incredible things that my wife has done, not only as an actress, but as an activist, as a union official, as a producer, as one of your producers. Lots of things. Anyway, yes, but certainly the primary thing that she is and thinks of herself as an actress.
Was she a New Yorker through and through?
Yes, we met in a bar. In the last Broadway show I had done, which had just closed, was called I Remember Mama. The leading man was a man named George Hearn, who was a very famous Broadway, is still alive. I think he's still alive. George, you're still alive, right? And he introduced me to Kitty in a bar. So yes, she's an actress. And
How did she take the news about coming to LA then?
she didn't like it.
No.
She hated it. She hated it. And it was the worst year and a half of our marriage because she did not want to be here.
You've been together for how long?
We'd been together for about 2 years. Now, we didn't move right after I did it. I took that $7,000 that I made on Bulba and bought her an engagement ring. And we were engaged for, I don't know, about 6 months, and then we got married. But after we got married, I convinced her to do this. And for the year and a half, the first year and a half, Kitty was not happy about being there and kept begging me to move back. But again, luck had turned my way. When I first got to LA, I did Hill Street Blues, which was a very popular show.
Yeah, huge.
And I thought, well, if I can get Hill Street Blues in the first month and a half that I'm here, this TV stuff should be easy.
It's a walk in the park.
Yeah, except for the next year and a half, there wasn't any other work. Yeah.
You had also, you'd established yourself as a New York actor. I think you've told me that you lived in that, well, it's the actor's apartment building. What's it called?
Manhattan Plaza.
Manhattan Plaza. And I used to walk by there and be like, someday somebody has to die, though. I mean, it's almost impossible to get in.
Yeah. In fact, once again, luck. I am the luckiest person I know. When it was empty, when there was no one in it, when they were taking the first applicants, we applied. It wasn't Kitty at that time; it was another lady, Rita Litton, and we applied for an apartment in Manhattan Plaza, which was very ritzy for us, for starving actors. It was very ritzy.
Yeah,
it's rent controlled, I take it. And
yes, it's rent controlled.
Right.
And we applied, and it was filling up. And Rita called me. I was in Detroit shooting a commercial, and Rita called and said, they've just called me, and I had an interview with Manhattan Plaza, and they found an apartment for us. But, of course, they wanted to talk to you as well. And I said, well, tell them that when I come back from Detroit, which was in a couple of days, I'll be glad to do that. So, and did you tell them? The one thing they asked, what is it that you want to have? We want to have a balcony. That was important to us. We wanted to have a balcony. Most of the apartments in Manhattan Plaza do have a balcony. Most of them do. And so I came back from Detroit, and they called me in. I had my interview, and it went well. And I said, is there any way? They said, well, we found you an apartment on the 6th floor of the 10th Avenue building. There's a 9th Avenue building, and there's a 10th Avenue building. And I said, does it have a balcony? He said, oh, yes, absolutely, it has a balcony. I said, well, that's all that matters. And I look forward to moving in.
Can you ride a horse? Yes, I can ride a horse.
Yeah. And I said, can I see the apartment before we move in? They said, no, construction's going on. For insurance matters, we can't allow anybody to go into the 10th Avenue building. And I walked out of the office, and the 10th Avenue building was right there. There was a plaza, and it was right there. And I thought, it's on the 6th floor. I can walk up. If there are no elevators, I can walk up 6 floors and see what the apartment looks like. So I walked up the 6 floors, found the apartment, looked around it. It was terrific. It was great. And just before I left, I went, and where's the balcony? And there was no balcony, because the balcony started on the 7th floor and went to, I think it's the 45th floor. There are 45 floors in each building. And but there was no balcony from the 6th floor down. 6th, 5th, 4th, no balconies.
It's not high enough to kill yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You could jump from there and survive. You'd land on a Port Authority bus, but you'd be fine. You'd be fine. I called up Rita and said, there's no balcony. She said, they told us there was a balcony. I said, I know. And I went back into the office and said, there's no balcony in the apartment you told us we were going to get. And they assured me, oh, absolutely, there's a balcony. And I said, no, there isn't. And we went back and forth, and they eventually asked me, how do you know that there's no balcony? And I went, I counted it up from the street. There aren't any. Yeah. So here's where the luck comes in. The 9th Avenue building is a better building than the 10th Avenue building. They had filled up all the apartments. And they came back to Rita and I, and they said, okay, there's no, but we'll make it up to you. We'll give you a bigger apartment, the show apartment on the 23rd floor of the 9th Avenue building, and we can move you into there. We said yes, and we had a much better apartment because I had lied to them.
Look at the Irish.
I mean,
we're not.
Oh my God.
And I could go on and on and on for days about how luck has. I've always been lucky and done the right thing, even though it made no sense whatsoever to do it. I have done the right thing at the right time, and the gods have smiled on me.
God bless
That's it,
you.
isn't it? It's the right thing.
How long did you live there? Long time.
I lived there for about less than a year. Rita and I actually stayed 3 months longer than I should have because Rita and I were breaking up. And, but I could not find another place comparable to this apartment in Manhattan.
That's a Seinfeld episode right there.
Yeah.
Stay together.
Exactly. That's what we did. And I stayed for 3 months and then eventually moved out because the relationship was ending. We're still good friends.
That's nice.
Rita was over a couple months ago to the house to visit. And so I moved on. But I have so many stories where luck was just luck. Star Trek is luck.
Well, let's get to Star Trek. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the luck of Star Trek.
You played a Ferengi in the Next Gen, didn't you?
Yes, unfortunately.
A couple of times.
Yeah, a couple of times.
And they were a different breed of Ferengi back then.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
electric whip.
What
Yeah.
with a blue whip? Yes, absolutely. Now,
Was it a hologram episode?
yeah. I'll say right here, I've said it many times, I'll say it again. I apologize for that first episode, not the episode, my performance. Letek was the character. The Ferengi's name was Letek. And it was nothing like what I was told they wanted. And I'm the one that screwed up. It's all my fault. I take responsibility. The Ferengi originally were meant to be the new Klingons.
Right.
We were supposed to be threatening.
Right.
We were supposed to be a menace to the Federation. We were supposed to be everything that the Klingons were and more. And I had the largest Ferengi part on that episode. There were 4 Ferengi, I believe. And
did you play it for laughs?
I thought I played it seriously, but I failed miserably. I failed miserably. And in fact, putting all these stories together, if you look at that episode, Letek, who I played, has a hunchback and a limp.
No way. Yes.
That's true.
You got it in.
Got it in. And that added to how bad that performance was. And I am so enormously embarrassed by that performance. And all of Quark, my whole agenda for 7 years was to eradicate that next generation performance.
Interesting. Did you feel as though had you acted with any kind of prosthetic and makeup like that before?
No.
No. Was there an element of that in it?
No. Just bad acting.
Bad
choices, bad acting, stupid behavior.
What about the director? I mean,
he had something to do with it. I mean, he allowed us to do the.
I mean, Rick let that go.
I think it was.
He saw the dailies and just let it go.
It's actually before Rick.
Yeah, that was first season.
Yeah, Rick was there, but Roddenberry was the showrunner.
That explains a little bit.
And Roddenberry was very sick, so, what they allowed this director to do with us and what we did
was criminal.
And so we became a comic race, for which I'm enormously good. Luck again.
Yeah.
So we became a comic race. And as Rick once said to me, right after I auditioned for Quark, he said, "We wrote this role for you." So, and I was the first person cast on Deep Space Nine.
Oh.
So because it turned out badly, and because I was a bad actor, they thought of me for Quark. and I spent 7 years trying to rehabilitate the Ferengi.
Well,
I imagine your audition process was probably pretty simple then.
What do you mean?
For Quark.
Well,
how many times did you read for it?
Oh, I read 4 times.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I read once early on. I think I must have been one of the first people they brought in. And then, and you guys will understand this, there was not any word for a month and a half.
Right. Yeah, it's
No word.
grueling, isn't it?
And I assumed it was over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My experience, limited as it was you get a week at the
Yeah,
most,
really.
not a month and a half.
That's a long
SAG gives
time.
you as a week, right? I
Yeah, but they did, and the agent was trying to get feedback. No feedback, nothing. So I assumed it was over. And then a month and a half later, they said, "Okay, you've got a call back." And I went in and read, and I noticed another actor they're going to read for the same part, who I recognized had played a Ferengi on Next Generation. And I went in before him, and I read, and then he followed me in. He didn't know me, I didn't know him, except I recognized him. And then I waited for him to come out. And we started talking. We sat on the steps of Paramount for about 2 hours. And that is the beginning of my enormous friendship and love affair with Max Credential.
No kidding.
No way,
that's
really?
beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
So do you know who he was auditioning for? Was
Yes,
it
for
for
Quark.
Rom? It was for Quark too.
yeah,
right?
there was no ROM. There was
There
a
was
ROM,
no
but not
ROM.
in our pilot script. All it says of that character is he says there's no name. He says
Right.
I'm Quark's brother.
Right.
And we actually, during our time together on the steps of Paramount, we talked about that other role. We talked about, well, if we don't get the Quark role, maybe we can play the brother role, which certainly had to go somewhere. It was the brother of one of the series regulars.
Right.
So we talked about that back and forth. And I asked Max, how did you approach it? The actor's talking.
Yeah.
How did you
You
approach
didn't
it?
answer the door. That's what I just I just go and stand by the door.
And he said, well, Ferengi are comic. I played it, I took a comic approach. And he said, isn't that the way you did it? Because he told me then, he said, all the Ferengi that followed you all had to see your episode of Outpost to see how Ferengi acted. So we were all given that episode. And so all the Ferengi on TNG all followed in our footsteps, Last Outpost.
And you're like, oh no.
And they were, horrible footsteps. And he said, how did you look at it? I said, I played it dramatically. I took it as a dramatic approach. And I have found, as a comic actor, and that's mostly what I do, that the only way to play comic characters is to approach them dramatically.
Yeah, it's a serious business, as it were.
Serious
That's what they say.
Yeah, you just do something slightly.
Did you have a 3-line bio that described him in any fashion that you?
No.
No, there was no sort of out.
I had played a Ferengi, and not only once, but twice. And so I was familiar with the species, but I was also dead set about changing the way the species.
It's your legacy.
Yeah, it was. It was my
Do
legacy.
you remember those first scenes that you auditioned with? Were they?
I did all the scenes in the show, all of them. I did all of them, and got a laugh in the final audition for the suits, which I'm sure you guys went through as well. But with the 34 suits sitting there,
Yeah, that's a big day, isn't it?
yeah, I had a scene with Kira, and I said, I love a woman in uniform. And got a laugh from the 34 suits. And I thought, well, that's good.
Let me ask you about so you don't have any of the gear on. How do you?
I had the voice.
How do you suggest Quark then?
I had the voice,
barefaced as it were.
I did the voice.
That was you went with the.
Yeah, this is the voice I used as a Ferengi. And it's true. You work with your females, arm them, and force them to wear clothing. One of the stupid things that I did in that original episode. Anyway, that's the voice I used. And after that episode, Berman called me in, as he called in all of us at the end of the first episode. And he said, Armin, lose the voice.
I was going to say, I didn't recognize the voice from one of us.
And if you watch that first episode of Deep Space Nine, Quark talks like this. He does. And in the second episode, he talks like this.
Right.
Oh my God.
Look, we need the Ricks of this world. God knows, John talks about the squawking. He squawked as billing as Dr. Phlox I was there. We got cast together, and he's in the audition. I've got my ear to and he's. And I'm like, fucking shit.
Yeah. He got the job that way.
When he got the job that way, he went to set the first scene and I happened to be, and he's with Jim Conway, who finally came around from Video Village and went, "Are you shitting me?" Unbelievable. But they let it go all the way. But yeah, actors want to, we need direction in that respect.
Yeah, we need to be told, no, it's too much.
Yeah, that's
it's
too much stuff.
It's too much.
We were talking before we came on about too much. You direct, and
Yes.
I mean, I've heard this many times. You'd rather see an actor with too much and pare it down.
Pare it down. And I've not learned to do that as an actor. I wish I had. As a director, I am very specific about that. Less. I want to see less. However, I do the opposite. As an actor, I tend to do a little bit more. But I have learned to come down a little. Certainly,
especially in front of a camera.
Yeah, you have to talk like this in front of a camera, or the performance really is too much.
Although what Jack Lemmon was doing something I forget. And
Billy Wilder. It was Some Like It Hot.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
And he
if
was
I do anything less, I won't be doing anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just be.
What was the? Geez,
Wait till you see my Felix. He'll be brain dead.
That's right. Hey, it's your line.
We're going to read The Odd Couple together.
Great.
Yeah, so that'll be fun.
Don't tell me how many days, 10 days, 12 days, something like that.
But I learned to talk to this from the show
We're
that
gonna
I did
wrap this
before
up, I
Star
think.
Trek, which is called Beauty and the Beast. I learned this from Ron Perlman. Ron Perlman, who was in Case and Makeup as well, she just never talked any louder than this.
Right.
And it was a fascinating performance. And we used to laugh at him. We used to say, Ron, we can't hear our cues.
Yeah. No kidding.
But he stayed with this. And I went, I guess that's how. And this was sort of the first major job I had after leaving New York. And I went, that's how you work on camera. You talk like that. I never did that as Quark, but this is actually the better way to approach camera work.
He's a sweetheart, Ron, isn't he? I did Sons of Anarchy with him. He's a real lovey. I'm absolutely. I can't say enough about your performance as Quark. It's muscular.
It's different.
It's I know. It's measured. You don't miss a beat. You got the best costumes.
Yes.
You do.
Yeah, I did.
Truly.
I mean, just the dandy. I mean, I think we were talking earlier. The dandy meets Puck.
No curtains are safe in the studio.
Exactly. A lot of curtains died because of Quark.
Bob Blackman will go for supper and you go, where the fuck are my curtains?
Exactly. Bob once told me that he loved designing for Quark. It was his favorite character in Deep Space Nine to design for, because they put me in wonderfully colorful costumes. Had to do something to offset that head of mine, but they were great costumes.
You wore them
heavy
well.
and they were hot.
Right.
But my brilliant wife, when I was complaining about the costume and the makeup one day at home, said to me, and she knew that I wanted to be on Star Trek, really wanted it. She said, well, Armin, if you want to be a knight, you have to wear the armor.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What were the teeth like?
Delivered.
The teeth were a little bit of a problem. I got they made me sound like Humphrey Bogart, which I think the character was modeled after. And they never really got in the way, but they were distinctive. The voice was so I could give up talking the way I talked on the first episode because the teeth modified my voice a little.
Sure.
And ironically, at the end of 7 years, about a month and a half before we finished, I walked into my trailer and someone had stolen the teeth. The teeth were just not there. I knew I put them in the same place for 7 years.
No kidding.
And they were gone. And Michael had to make new ones for me. And when I did Lower Decks, and I'm very grateful for that, I had to wear substitute teeth, which weren't as good as the ones I had worn.
Max got the Stonehenge of all.
I know,
really,
right?
I mean,
and can you imagine him having to kiss Chase Masterson? Poor Chase, who played Lita, had to be kissed with that tooth coming out.
Snaggletooth.
Yeah, the check still.
I mean, but you must have had to eat a ton of food to keep the weight on from the sweating that you would do under that headpiece.
It was a lot. It was a lot, as opposed to Renee, who couldn't eat anything because his makeup came down to his lips.
Right.
And if he started to masticate, to chew, the bond would break. And he just didn't want to put his makeup artist through the work. And so he would just have yogurt for the first 4 years. And then after 4 years, he said, screw that. I'm just going to eat.
Andy Robinson said, he was kind of deeply unhappy, really, with having to wear that stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And I mean, what does an actor have when he or she performs? He has his voice, he has his eyes, he has his face, and he has his body. So with Andy, you've covered up his face, which pinpoints his eyes. So the great thing about his performance, and many people who are good in prosthetic makeup, is that you don't get any of this. You can't use any of that. It's all in your voice and all in your eyes.
Right.
And Andy's eyes were incredible too.
Oh, so were yours. He was noting, the Michael Caine school of acting. You never blink.
You don't.
dude.
You never blink.
I mean, is that? I mean, does that come easy, or do you just concentrate on
Fear. If I blink, they'll fire me.
Yeah.
Joyous years, no doubt.
They were
It was a happy
joyous.
set, wasn't it? Deep Space.
I've heard that said. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
Okay.
No, I'm not saying that we didn't have a good time. We did. I wouldn't, if I were going to compare our set, and I don't know so much about yours, although you had Scott.
We were very lucky with Scott.
Yeah. I've known Scott long before Star Trek.
Yeah.
Long before either one of us did Star Trek.
He's a gent.
He's beyond that.
Yeah.
He's the best of the best. So with that as number one on your call sheet, I'm sure that was a very nice set.
Yeah.
Our set was nice too. But when I think about the sets that I visited, the Voyager set or the Next Generation set, happy.
Right.
Happy's the wrong word. We were not his choice.
Yeah, when he joined in.
Yeah, it was a different set.
He was
him.
coming from a different vibe. And
yeah, the Next Generation people, they laughed all the time. We didn't laugh.
Right.
At all. Not really.
Not really, no.
God,
what we did.
It's a long day, isn't it?
No.
And you come in early.
Yes, we came in early. We were there. I'm very proud of this, actually. We were there to do the best Star Trek we could possibly do. We took the work very seriously. We were blessed with phenomenal actors, phenomenal supporting actors.
I'm straight.
If we didn't do our best with these guys, we were going to look really bad.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did our very best. And one of the things, and so it wasn't laughs. We worked on our craft and tried to do it as best we could. The other thing is, there's an old adage, the tone of a set is set by number one on the call sheet, the first person on the call sheet. And the first person on the call sheet is the captain in Star Trek. Avery is a very wonderfully serious, charismatic person. And he would laugh, and when he laughed, it was room-filling. But he didn't laugh that often. And so we were all very serious-minded. Now, I will tell you about doing the best work we can. I'm very proud of this, so I'm going to boast about this. I've been boasting a lot already, but I'm very proud of this. Because the people who played Ferengi were encased in rubber prosthetic heads, and because we had those large ears, which made us deaf.
Really?
We had large pieces of rubber over our ears. So we weren't completely deaf, but if you put your hands over your ears like this and talk, deaf. That's what it sounded like.
Really?
And so I asked Max and Aaron and Jeffrey and Wally Shawn and Cecily Adams and anybody that was part of a Ferengi episode to come to my house Saturday and Sunday to rehearse the scenes, run the lines, talk about what we were going to do. Max would always say after we had done, okay, now how is the director going to screw this up? and so we would do that too.
You would get the scripts early enough to be able to...
Sometimes,
Right?
Especially, if we got it Friday, then we could work on it. And kudos to all those actors for 7 years.
They showed up.
Came to my house for every major Ferengi episode and worked on those scripts so that we could give them not only the best performance, but we knew also, you guys didn't have to wear makeup, so you don't know this. It was 12-hour days, that you do know. About hour 9, having been in those heads for 9 hours, I'm sure it's true for the Cardassians, Andy as well, Mark. At 9, after hour 9, it was like having a bad head cold. It was like you couldn't see straight. The lines were, in and out. You could barely stand up. But we knew we had another 3 hours to go. And I think that's one of the reasons the other actors showed up, is that we needed to know how to act on fumes
right,
in order to keep going.
It shortened that day considerably, and Kudos
and
to you.
Right.
Yeah. So
It's a big thing, though. I mean, if you get that rehearsal time before you're actually in front of the camera, it makes
Huge difference.
huge. We did one episode where we got a script. It was the Shuttlepod one, and it made an enormous difference.
right, because you're not, because if you don't know this, you get on a set, you read it once, twice for the director and the DP, for the director of photography. You go to your trailer and then you shoot it.
Yeah.
And then you hope you work it out in the master. You hope you get it.
Yeah.
Whereas myself and most of the people I worked with in those Ferengi episodes were all theater actors.
Yeah.
And we were used to rehearsal. We wanted to rehearse this sucker.
Right.
And if we were able to make the Ferengi believable, it's because of the time we put in on the week.
I think those scenes, and particularly those characters, they require really pinpoint timing, and it shows. It really shows.
And kudos especially to Max and to Aaron. Who were phenomenal.
They're so good.
Yeah.
God bless Aaron.
Oh,
And you really are. It's a testament to the hard work and the talent. I mean, it really, I can't say enough.
Were you?
It's been a joy watching.
Thank you.
Did you do any theater during the time that you?
No theater. I did a lot of other TV though. Most people know that I did Buffy the Vampire Slayer at the same time.
I did a Buffy. I saw that on your.
Yeah.
So what I did, was it like I did one episode? Whew, that's a set.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, that was a set.
I did 3 years.
Oh God.
3 years.
So you know what it was like.
I do, and because aside from Anthony,
That was not a happy set.
no. And because I came and went, and because
Sorry, guys.
I was like Andy. I was a very familiar recurring character on Buffy. I was the asshole
Principal, right? Yeah.
So the people who were having a hard time with each other would come secretly to my trailer and say, "You'll never guess what so and so did."
God.
And then the next day or another time, the other person would come and say,
Hilarious.
"You'll never guess what so and so." And
Did
so-
Josh Whedon never show up?
Oh, all the time.
All the time?
Yeah, you guys will appreciate this. So Joss Whedon was there every day that I shot
Right.
for 3 years.
Right.
Every day.
day.
And in the beginning, I thought, because we know Berman. Berman was
showing
never
up.
on the set.
Right.
And I thought, why is the artistic director, why is the executive producer here every time I'm here? Why is that? I thought, does he not trust me? And it was such a dichotomy from Berman. Berman didn't show up, and Joss was there every day. And one of the things Joss had to do was babysit. He had to babysit because they were mostly young actors.
Yeah.
And he was making sure that everybody was copacetic.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
And Tony did a lot of that too. Tony Head was the other adult, you can say. They were all adults, but Tony was the other. I mean, he was of a certain age.
Let me tell you, that's saying something.
Yeah. But
God bless you, Tony.
Tony's terrific. Tony's terrific. I had a lovely time on Buffy, and I didn't have to wear makeup. And I remember going around to all the vampires going, drink a lot of water, drink a lot of water.
Hour 9.
Yeah,
hour 9.
I was a watcher of a vampire that got.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got bit. Jeff Kober, do you know?
Sure, yeah.
Jeff was the dastardly vampire they had that week, and in an idle moment watching him, oh dear. And then they morphed me live on screen. First time they ever did it, I morphed into a vampire live on screen. That was some makeup too. It's a long day. Then we chased around Glendale for a few nights.
Thankfully, they like to shoot at night because there were, I would say, 3 times when I had 26, 27-hour days.
No shit.
I would start at 5 and do Quark, get out of makeup around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, drive to Torrance, where the high school was, and then shoot.
You were double dipping.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't get that.
Yeah. Nobody did. Again, Mr. Lucky.
Oh,
Yeah, Mr. Lucky. I told the guys on Voyager, I said, you should do what I did, especially to Johnny Phillips, Ethan Phillips. I said, listen, you're not Starfleet. They're not going to use you that much. So I said, you should try and do other TV shows like I did. Because it wasn't just Buffy. I did a lot of other TV shows while I was shooting Star Trek. And the line producer, Steve Oster, allowed me to do all these shows. But the line producer for Voyager said, no, No, your contract says you can only do this show, and you're only doing this show.
Oh.
Mr. Lucky, I got to do it.
I mean, I was going to say, it's almost, I'm amazed that Rick let you do that, and that, the line producers let you
they just
jiggle.
Steve, and I don't know about Rick, but Steve, who communicated with me, said, if we don't need you, you can go off and do what you want to do.
Wow.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
Steve and the Buffy producer, David, I don't know, they used to work it out. So they would have conversations and say, okay, we need Armin for 2 scenes of Buffy. Well, we only need Armin for 1 scene on Star Trek. Great. You can have him on Wednesday, and we'll take him on Monday.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning something about Starfleet and Johnny Phillips.
Yeah. So it was very interesting to me, and I passed this on to Ethan Phillips when he was cast as the non-Starfleet person in Voyager. I said, you're going to find that if you're not part of Starfleet, if you're not part of the problem-solving team, you are an outsider, not only to the episode, but to some extent to the rest of the cast. Because the team works together to solve problems. And so they have a lot of scenes together where they're working it all out. And then for both of us, we come in and provide comic relief. And therefore, we're somehow other than Starfleet. It was great to be on Star Trek, and both of us, enjoyed that, and we're very honored to be part of the show and the franchise. But it was sort of being the second-class person on the show.
Yeah,
You felt that.
Yes.
I can sense what you're saying. Not that we... Phlox, I guess, our particularly prosthetic makeup character, was part of the problem-solving team.
Definitely.
And we did not have anyone.
Well, when Jeff was around, he would,
No, agreed. But I think, I felt that we were an accommodating cast, very much so. Scott, we were talking about this. Scott was the first guy, hand out. If he didn't know your face, and even when he did,
Prince.
he'd welcome you to the set and publicly in front of 80 people, whether you were an extra or not. And just brilliant. I mean, I can't say enough about that. But yeah, that's hard. That's hard to go to work when, how did you sort of put that to bed in your head?
Well, I was sort of lucky, as always. Eventually, they began to have the regular Deep Space Nine episodes, of which, of course, I was a part of. But then they began to have these Ferengi episodes. So that while their family, the Starfleet family, was growing and getting used to each other and bonding really well, the same thing was happening with the Ferengi family.
Right.
That the actors that were involved in the Ferengi plots were growing and bonding and becoming a unit. So what I lost on the swings, I got on the roundabout.
It really translates to the screen. It really does. You guys are so great together. Max is such a great foil to...
and such a wonderful man. He took a lot of abuse from my character. Not from me, maybe sometimes from me too. But he took a lot of abuse from my character. And he always put up with it. He was always there, 100%. And remember, he didn't get cast as Quark.
No,
and I've thought about that for years.
When you were telling that story earlier, I think about that.
Can you imagine,
That's a tough
having
one
to deal with an actor who got your part?
Yeah, that's it's like your brother who became the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you didn't.
Yeah. It was a hard position, and he was so wonderfully kind and helpful and supportive, and terrific as Rom.
Oh, his performance is so measured and beautiful.
Yeah.
He doesn't get a lot to say.
No.
But it's just all there.
Yeah. In fact, Ira Bear, the showrunner, once shared with me a piece of information. He began to realize, watching dailies, that I would be loath to do the really large reactions to things. But Max was very capable of doing it.
Yeah.
And was eager to do it. And so when they wanted a large Ferengi-like reaction, they would give it to Max.
They give it to Max. And he delivered every time. Yeah. It was just buttoned right on the nose of it every time.
Yeah.
When did you start teaching?
before Star Trek, during that year and a half when there was no work and we were living in L.A., I got an opportunity to teach at a small Shakespeare festival here in Los Angeles called Theatricum Botanicum. And
It's a
Ellen,
great name.
it's a wonderful name, and they do. Will Geer is Ellen's father, the wonderful actor, stage actor, and TV actor from John Boy from Waltons.
Waltons.
And he came up with the name Theatricum Botanicum. And so I began to teach there as a way to make a living, just simply to pay the bills. It wasn't very much, but it was something.
These are already actors. I mean, you were coaching.
I was. I would not say, except for that Hill Street Blues performance. During that time, I was not an actor. I was doing. Forgive me. I was doing commercials, and that is acting, but it wasn't the type of acting that I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And I needed to pay my bills. Kitty and I would walk the dogs and just try to scratch our heads, going, "The rent's coming up.
Yeah, really?
How do we pay for this?" So when Ellen offered me this job to teach a little, I took that up, and it was again lucky because it turned out to be something that I was passionate about. I became passionate about teaching, specifically about teaching Shakespeare, and as the years have gone by, I've become more and more knowledgeable, not only about Shakespeare but how I teach it and what I focus on. And it eventually led to a short-lived career at University of Southern California, where I was an adjunct professor of Shakespeare in the theater department. But I've taught Shakespeare all over, and really enjoy it. And if I had my druthers, if life threw this curve at me and I had to choose between acting and teaching, without thinking about it, I would take on teaching, as long as it paid as well.
Really? Would you now?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you never find the frustration in having someone, or is it the joy of seeing them, the light going on? And
it is the joy of seeing the light, because the way I teach Shakespeare,
yeah,
it gives people such a new insight into how to look at the lines, primarily the lines, and sometimes of the characters as well. And watching that light go off as often as it does in my class, only not that I'm such a great teacher, which I am, but rather because it's such a new way of looking at it, it's an old way of looking at it because it's the way Shakespeare looked at it, and so seeing that is such a joy.
Describe what that would be then.
Okay, I will give you a very quick example. When I teach Shakespeare, I teach what's called rhetoric, and that's what Shakespeare was taught, and his contemporaries were taught from the first day of school to the last day of university. And they were steeped in the rules of rhetoric. So
it's a recognized
science,
an
art form.
Yeah,
it's the art form of preparing an argument to convince someone of the rightness of an action.
Right.
And there are different techniques in that science, that art form, that are called figures, hence the figure of speech, figure of speech. We get that expression from rhetoric, the figures of speech. One of the figures is something called antithesis, where you compare two things that are opposite. The most famous antithesis in Shakespeare is to be or not to be. And a good actor has to recognize that antithesis is there. And by the way, it's not just for actors, it's for readers of Shakespeare as well, or directors, or anybody encountering Shakespeare. If you don't recognize and identify some of the basic principles of rhetoric, then you really can't fathom what's being said. So a good actor can't say this way, to be or not to be, that is the question, because there's no sense of antithesis in that. If you're an actor who wants to live, then the to be part of the equation is the more important part. Then the actor has to say to be, and then denigrate the second part, or not to be, that is the question. If it's a Hamlet who wants to die, who's contemplating suicide, then the not is the important part. To be or not to be, that is the question. Now, that's an easy one because it's such a famous line. You don't really get a sense of that. But when you realize that on every page of Shakespeare, the figure of antithesis is there, and this is one, and antithesis is only one of 200 figures. Once you get a sense of looking for the rhetorical figures, all of a sudden the language is exponentially clearer to everybody involved. So, with that segue, if I may, and I know you're going to ask me anyway, but I want to get to it now.
I want to do your class.
Well, really quickly, on the cruise, I did the O for a Muse of Fire. Oh, for a... I'm funny. Anyway, I did that you were doing a class.
Which I will do on this cruise as well.
Excellent. I'm going to check it out as well, because I sat there after that, and the notion of rhetoric, which I'd never heard before, was a revelation to me. I now understood it, as you just said, in a completely new, much more accessible way.
Right.
Yeah. It's a unfortunately, somewhere around the beginning of the 20th century, the teaching of rhetoric, at least in American schools, was foregone. It was always taught up until then. And then for some reason, public schools and private schools just forgot. You can still get it in college, but it's a rare pre-college class that teaches you that. And it is the Rosetta Stone, for me anyway, for performing and reading Shakespeare. Now, that said, I want to get to my books.
Oh, yes.
So I've written a series of books. I've written actually 2 series. First series was called Merchant Prince, which I started and wrote while I was doing Deep Space Nine. And these books...
This is the John Dee character.
This is John Dee.
Yeah.
The story for these books started also in Deep Space Nine, so it's taken me 20 to 25 years to get these books written and published. But it's a historical mystery about Shakespeare and, as you say, John Dee. John Dee, for those of you who don't know who John Dee is, was the great English Renaissance scholar who was both a scientist, a mystic, a philosopher, an astrologer, an astronomer, a mathematician. He was a Renaissance man. He was also, as I said, a mystic, and history has not done him well because of his investigations into angels, which he swore. Bible says angels exist, so he assumed angels exist, and he wanted to talk to them. He wanted
not in this city of angels.
That's right. Good, very good. Why didn't I write it? I'm going to write a 4th book.
Couldn't resist that one.
And because he spent many years trying to talk to angels through con men. Con men sort of told him that they could, and he took their word that they could. And he, in fact, wrote in what's called the Enochian Dictionary. It's a dictionary of angelic terms, the words that angels use in heaven. But because he did that, history has looked unfavorably on him, and they've sort of relegated him to the nut bag. But in the last 75 years or so, his reputation has been burnished, and he's being appreciated for all the incredible scientific things that he did as well.
Part of Elizabeth I's
court, and she always attributed the fact she had a very long reign.
She did.
Yeah, and she always attributed her long reign to the fact that John Dee picked her inaugural day. I believe it's November the 17th, I believe, is the day that Elizabeth I became queen. And he picked that day for her.
Right.
And because he was and she was an astrologer, it was a propitious day, and she attributed her long reign to the fact that Dee had picked the right day for her. But he did other things for her as well. He helped to work on, I can't remember its longitude or latitude, to do that for the English sailors. He brought a lot of scientific things from Europe back to England. He trained a lot of people, not only in science but also in literature. He had the largest library in England. I believe the National Library of England may have started with Dee's books.
What sort of background was he? Was he humble origins? Or
yeah, his father was a bureaucrat, and he was one of those students who raised rose to the top of his class immediately.
Right.
Well respected, and wanted to learn about everything. And at that time, perhaps you could do that.
Yeah.
And he studied constantly. And the Queen, unfortunately, promised him all of his lifetime that she would promote him to bigger and better things, which she never did.
Oh.
She was very stingy, Elizabeth was. And he died in poverty.
Oh,
he did.
But
how did you discover him in your...
Michael Scott, a prolific Irish writer living, I believe he's still alive.
Was he the chap that helped you
Yes.
co-write?
Yes.
Ghostwrite?
He co-wrote the first novel with
first
me,
one.
he introduced me to John Dee, and so we wrote the first book of Merchant Prince together. Then fast forward several years, and I'm visiting with Michael in Ireland, where he lives, and he mentioned the idea of writing a series of novels where Dee and Shakespeare get together and, like Holmes and Watson, solve mysteries that involve the various plays that Shakespeare wrote.
That's a fabulous
It's a great
marriage,
idea.
isn't it?
It's a great idea. And so my books, after 20 years, I only got one play done, and that's Twelfth Night. And my books are about historical characters, very historical. Everything in my books that don't have to deal with Twelfth Night are historically correct. Everything, the chairs, the table, the food, the dresses, everything is historically correct. But they interact with the characters of Twelfth Night, who of course are fictional. And so it's a book both of history and of comedy.
Do the characters live in a real world?
Yes, they live in a real world. They live on Allyria, which is
Right.
the title of
Right.
the series. But for me, Allyria is the Isle of Jersey.
Right.
In the English Channel.
Yeah.
And there are...
They're all tax exiles.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I see them?
Yes.
I want to get a little more of a close-up.
You've got them.
And this is the one that just came out 2 days ago.
Oh, wow.
This is
congratulations.
in balance. Thank you. It's in Balance of Power, which is the third of the three. Connor's got the first and the second.
I'm ordering as soon
Betrayal
as
of
I get home.
Angels. Betrayal of Angels.
That's the first one. And the second one is Sea of Troubles, which is the middle book.
Sea of Troubles.
And
Now, did Michael help you rewrite them all, or didn't you?
No.
Did I not see
what
that you had
happened?
someone else?
No, Michael helped me write the first Merchant Prince book, and he wrote about 60% of it. He was the writer. I was the actor. I was the talent.
He had a history of historical
Folklore. Yeah,
novel.
yeah. And in fact, after Jackson did Lord of the Rings, one of Michael's books was going to be the second picture, and at the very last moment that got nixed, and I don't know why.
That's not so lucky.
Yeah, that's not
You want to steer clear of that guy.
So Michael
Sorry,
helped
Michael.
me. Michael with the first book, and then he took off, and a wonderful science fiction writer named Chelsea Yarborough helped me with the second book, and then at that point I thought I can do this myself.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So I wrote the third book myself.
Did you purposely not go back to Michael for book 2, or was he just busy? Or
He was busy.
yeah, right.
He was writing other things, and so he was busy, and so I didn't go back.
How difficult was it to publish and get?
Well, the first one was easy because, again, Mr. Lucky. I'm sitting at a
Sickening,
convention next to a publisher.
No, where?
I can't remember where it was years ago, but I was at a convention, and he said to me, "I'm thinking of putting science fiction actors together with science fiction writers and coming up with stories that we can publish." And he had, I can't remember whom, but he had a couple already that he had used. And he said, "Would you be interested in doing that?" And as a young man, I had some aspirations to be a writer.
So this wasn't formulated in any germ way, or no?
No. And so so he teamed me up with Michael, and Michael and I met in L.A., and we came up with the plot for Merchant Prince. And Michael was supposed to help me write all 3 books, but as I said, Michael had other things and he had to leave. So then they teamed me up with Chelsea Yarborough, and then the third one I did myself.
Where does the 34th line come in now? What's that?
34th rule.
Sorry.
Okay. Here's something I'm admitted to right now. I did not write one word of the 34th rule.
Not one rule.
No.
Not 1 through 33.
David wrote all of the book, and he's very good. What happened was David and I and Eric, and I'm purposely not saying last names because I don't remember everybody's last name. I can barely remember my last name. We went to Ira and tried to pitch the 34th rule as an episode. And were turned down. And when we left the room, we knew we had been turned down. We were disappointed. And David said, why don't we write this as a book for the Star Trek book series for Simon & Schuster? And having already written Merchant Prince, I thought that was a great idea. And I assumed that I would write with him the way I wrote with Michael or Chelsea Yarbrough, in tandem together. But David didn't make that assumption, and rightfully so. David wrote the whole thing himself, and they put my name on the cover as the lead writer.
Right.
It's a lie.
Wow.
David wrote it all, and he did a very good job.
Produced by... I didn't say it. Written by... I didn't say it either.
But if you're interested in Elizabethan history, if you're interested in Shakespeare, and I propose...
As am I.
I propose a suggestion for how Shakespeare became... He went from being a lad from a small town, Stratford-upon-Avon, to becoming English language's greatest author. I propose how that happened in my books.
Oh. Connor was asking you before we came on air, as it were, what's your take on whether or not Shakespeare actually wrote the stuff? So let's go back to that discussion.
Okay.
You had some nice things to say.
Yes. This is my answer when asked that question. Do you think Shakespeare wrote the books? Now, as I said to Dominic and Connor, we're all actors. We know that actors can never keep a secret, that's just not possible. It's not in our DNA to do that.
I got a couple.
But you're going to tell us now. Yeah. And so I know that Shakespeare, who was part of the Queen's Company and the Queen's Men and the King's Men for years, and worked with similar actors, they're called shareholders. They were equal partners in the company, plus the hired men that they hired. You cannot tell me that for 20 years and more, these actors kept the secret that Shakespeare didn't write these plays. Yeah. That just
seems preposterous.
Preposterous. Yeah. And then the other part of the equation that I like to propose is that, again, as we all know, when you're doing a modern play, a new play, and you're sitting there with the writer, almost always when you're sitting there with the writer, after you, the actor or the director, has read the script, you have questions about the script, and you ask the writer, why did you write this? Or what does this mean? Or what did you intend to do with this? And I'm sure Shakespeare's actors would have done the same thing with their writer. And you cannot tell me that for 20 years, Shakespeare said, I'll get back to you on that. They would have known.
Scurries off to ask the Duke of Essex.
Yeah, find his flip phone and say, Essex, what do we mean by this?
It's all double Dutch. What does this mean?
Right. The real question is, how did he find the books that all scholars believe he must have read?
Yeah.
And that is part of the answer that I give
that's
here. Lovely. The question is, how did Shakespeare get these books? There are no public libraries. Books are really expensive.
Yes.
How did he have access to these books that we know he used to write his plays?
Do you have? I mean, do you want a thumbnail sketch, or do you want to save it for
read the book?
Yeah, good on you. I'm ordering as soon as I get home. That's very exciting. They sound.
And if you want to order it, you go to www.arminshimerman.com/shop, and you can buy the books there.
All right. What's the post?
Shimerman with one M in the middle.
Did you bring a box with you, by the way?
A box? No.
Not on Amazon. Through your website?
Yes, you can get it through Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. And some bookstores carry it as well. Absolutely.
You prefer .com?
I get more money that way.
Yeah, there you go. Noted.
And then...
thank you, Mark.
The foundation that you work with your lovely wife.
Yes. I wouldn't call it a foundation. I would call it a charity. I would call it... It's somewhere between foundation and charity, because charity indicates that we're just raising money for a particular thing. And what PanCan, and I'm about to tell you more about that, what PanCan does is more than just collect money for, but they do their own research, they do their own outreach to patients, to doctors, to anyone in the medical community. And so let me tell you a little about this organization. It's called PanCan. And several years ago, my wife Kitty and Jonathan Frakes and I started what we call Star Trek Against Pancreatic Cancer. Unfortunately, Jonathan's brother died of pancreatic cancer. Fortunately, my wife Kitty Swink is a survivor of pancreatic cancer, and I am the husband of a survivor. So we formed a fundraising team to raise money for PanCan, and because our lives were very much affected by pancreatic cancer. And when my wife was diagnosed, and she is now an 18-year survivor of pancreatic cancer, when she was diagnosed, the survival rate was 3%. I'm happy to say that as of this year, the survival rate is 11%. Still not good, of course, but getting better. And the only way we'll make that to 90, 100% is by organizations like PanCan that raise money to do research and help. If anyone out there has a relative, a friend that is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, please look up PanCan, PanCan, because not only will they help you, advise you how to deal with this disease and this diagnosis, they can also tell you the best doctors in your organization. And every year, PanCan puts on an event called Purple Stride, which is a fundraiser. And there are marches across the country, Purple Stride marches, to help raise money to defeat pancreatic cancer. Last year, Kitty and Jonathan marched in Los Angeles, and I marched in Kansas City. So please think about this organization. If you see us tweeting or social media about it, please think about perhaps donating to this. And by the way, because we mentioned this to John Billingsley, whose mother died of pancreatic cancer, John has just joined our team as one of the co-founders.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you. We want to see this disease disappear. We want everyone to have Kitty's career with this disease.
Right. Yeah, please God. That's a small world connection we have that, I've recently been seeing Mr. Joe Hurt. Michael led me to him, and of course, Kitty
introduced Michael to Joe.
Michael. Yeah. How did she meet him back then?
Charlotte Ray was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and Larry knew that Kitty had pancreatic cancer, and he asked Kitty if she would speak to Charlotte about her diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And while they were talking, Larry, who had been going to Joe Hurt, recommended that Kitty go to Joe as well. And that's when Kitty met Joe, and a phenomenal healer, an expert in Korean medicine.
Yeah.
And does miraculous things. And I've seen people miraculously, it's not, I shouldn't use miraculous because that sounds science fiction-y. It isn't that at all. It is medicine. It's just Eastern medicine. But he's able to help people to get through physical ailments. It's amazing. It's amazing. And as I said to Dominic, if you've got an ailment that is fatal, one of his best abilities is to help you face death. And I've talked to a number of people who were in that situation, and their deaths were made easier by what Joe was able to give them.
Yeah, he's a truly wonderful human being, and he's spent a lifetime, certainly, being, as he said to me yesterday, how long have I been bhakti? It's decades now, and it shines through.
Yeah.
I met him at just the right time.
Is a good person to know, and my wife attributes her recovery to both Western medicine and Eastern medicine.
Yeah. No, I think that the combination of the both is probably the right take. Well, that's your work with the organization is fantastic, Armin, and I hope that maybe we already donate quite a portion of our. Well, we haven't been paid yet. People, we have not been paid yet, and we're already giving a load of money to John Billingsley. But
you're not paid. I mean, I'm not getting paid for this. Oh wait, hold on.
but we had him for this long.
We'll find a way where we can.
Yes, if we just tell people as we are now, just go to PanCan, www.pancan.org, and make a contribution, or give to Star Trek Against Pancreatic Cancer for Purple Stride. That will be great.
We will do. Mm-hmm. You played Dr. Nefarious.
Oh, my God.
Let's talk about that for a sec. I couldn't help but, I mean, I'm not particularly au fait, but the name alone. On a video game for Ratchet and Clank?
Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah. Tell me about
again,
Dr.
Mr.
Nefarious.
Lucky. Mr. Lucky. Renee Aubergenois had Aubergenois. Yes, Mr. Voiceover.
God bless him.
Had done a lot of voiceovers, and his college roommate was his voiceover agent. They were friends since college. TJ Escott.
What are the chances of that? I mean, it's nuts.
Not very good.
And I met TJ through Renee, and I know I'm wise enough to recognize where my career is either going or where it's not going. And I knew at the time that I asked this question of TJ that my life in front of the camera was probably going to begin to go downhill. Star Trek was over, Buffy was over. A lot of the appearances that I was making were not showing up as much as they used to. And I thought, I need to reinvent myself. I need to find something else. And I knew Renee had done a lot of voiceovers. And so I cornered TJ once and asked him, would he represent me as a voiceover client? And he very professionally said, send me your voiceover reel and I will consider it. But I didn't have a voiceover reel. And
Mark Grau. We drive. Did you seen those studios on the corner? Did you go to Mark?
I did. I didn't go to Mark. No.
Right.
I went to a wonderful teacher director named Charlie Adler. Have any of you ever come across?
Oh, I know that.
I know the name.
Yeah.
Oh, he's done a ton of stuff, and a wonderfully comic, energetic man. I always say about Charlie, he's Robin Williams on speed.
That's a lot.
Yeah, he's a handful. And I went to Charlie's class because he's an old friend of mine, and Charlie helped me to work on voiceovers. And he missed one class, and his substitute teacher was a lady named Chris Zimmerman. And so, to make this story a little bit shorter, TJ eventually hired me because I got a reel together, and one of my first auditions was for Chris Zimmerman, who was the substitute teacher. And they cast me as Dr. Nefarious in Ratchet and Clank. Now, this is about 18 years ago. And I thought it was a one-shot deal.
Give us a taste.
Okay.
Squishes! I hate squishes! He's very high up, and he's very energetic. And he talks at the very top of my range.
That's a lot of work. That sounds great.
And
not what I thought I was going to
get. And the people over Insomniac Games fell in love with this character. And so the one-shot deal has now turned into, what is it? I think it's 8 games, 1 movie, and almost a TV show. There was a pilot for Ratchet.
Wow.
And it's just been a godsend. And you know, again, Mr. Lucky, this should not have happened. It should not have happened.
So your first audition for
one of my
voiceover.
first. Absolutely, wasn't the first, but one of the first. And then, if I may, and I've done a lot of voiceovers for other things as well. But other one that probably nobody knows that I've done the voice for, but I'm very proud of. It's some of the best writing I ever encountered in my life, and I've done a lot of Shakespeare. It's a game called BioShock.
Yes.
Oh.
I was going to ask you.
Hey, the nurse in the house.
Is that your game?
Are you still here?
So I play I play the very iconic character in BioShock. I believe there are 3 versions there are 3 different installations of BioShock. In fact, they're making a movie of BioShock right now, which I'm not in. But I play perhaps the pivotal character of Andrew Ryan, which anyone who's played BioShock probably will find that very hard to believe.
Is he handsome?
He is.
He is. God bless him. That's fun.
But some of the speeches that they wrote for me, for my character, are incredible. And get Mark to play back some of this. They are incredible speeches. They are right out of Ayn Rand is what they are.
Really?
And astonishing speeches. And unlike any other voiceover work I ever did, I would come in and do my work, and then I'd come back a month later and I'd say to them, didn't I do this speech already? And they said, yeah, we liked so much what you did, we changed it, we made it better. And then I would do it again, and I'd come back a month later, and there'd be other work to do, but the speech was again rewritten, even better.
Wow!
And those speeches, it's a phenomenal game.
Yeah.
But the language that they gave me was astonishing, and it's the great thing about being a voiceover actor. Yes, it can be very hilarious. You heard Dr. Nefarious, but it has allowed me to play roles that I could never play on camera.
Me too, a couple of times, yeah. And it's very precise art form.
It is that.
Like
it all done. I talked before about the eyes and the face, but here you only have your specifics in the way you say things.
So you don't do mocam or anything like that?
No, I don't. But I mean, you're not going to believe this. At one time in my career, I played the voice of Superman.
No.
Yeah. Can you imagine me as Superman? I was Superman.
Sure.
No, sure. Are you Kitty Swink? Super Mouse, absolutely. But you can play things that they would never consider you for, and because of who I am, I'm a balding, elderly. That's hard to say. Elderly, strange Eastern European-looking person. They only cast me for what I look like and what I can do with what I look like.
Yeah, you're an actor, though.
I'm an actor, but we know.
It screams out of you,
We know that when you walk in, your audition is about half done when you walk through the door.
It's
a bit different in theater, though. I think that you can win roles in the theater.
And that's why I continue in the theater.
Yeah.
My TV work is not over, but we can see the sunset.
The wedge is getting thin.
Yeah, it's getting very thin.
Right.
But in the theater, which I told you, when I marched for Purple Stride, I was doing a play in Kansas City. So I still work in the theater a great deal because there is a little bit more room to do that. But in TV and film, half your audition is over when you walk in the door and haven't said a word.
They've made up their mind, and you have not even put the Not that you get to walk in anymore these days.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, exactly. Whether you've
but they do the same thing. They look at you on the film and go, okay, well,
next.
Yeah, before you even get a chance to.
It's probably even more gruesome.
Right. Yeah.
So voiceovers is a wonderful field, and some of the great voiceover actors that I have worked with are phenomenally talented.
Yeah.
Phenomenally talented.
Really are.
Yeah, one of my good friends. He has made quite a career.
Yeah.
He's part of Mike McCall.
Mike McCall.
He doesn't do what you call so much dramatic stuff. He's a spokesperson, this night tonight on. He was Fox.
He was Fox
Sports,
football's
and he was,
guy for the.
He's just got a voice though.
Yeah,
pulls out of him.
If you're blessed with, like Michael Dorn, for instance, Michael does a ton of voiceovers. It's a great way to get around what you're born with the genes that you're born with, and you get to play something else.
Cool. Well, on that note, we should play some things.
What about some fan questions?
Okay, fan questions.
Some fan questions? Great.
2 hours. 2 hours.
You got 2 hours?
Yeah. No. That's the answer to the first question.
2 hours. Here we go. Okay.
Curated for you.
Lydia from Patreon asks, what learnings or takeaways have you found most influential in your technique and growth as an actor?
Well, certainly, as I mentioned before, my learning about rhetoric is enormously important for not only Shakespearean acting but also voiceovers and when I did them commercials. But so that's enormously important. The one thing I've learned but not yet mastered, as I've also mentioned, is how to do less. I do think that doing less as an actor is better than doing more. Sometimes more is required. Certainly Quark required more. But I think less is more is a good maxim to keep.
I have to say, you sound like a wonderful teacher.
I am.
I know you know that.
I don't like this less thing.
I'm sure you do it too, Doc. I'm sure you do it too. And I've seen you do it.
I'm not happy with that.
But isn't it fun when you get to do more?
Yeah, right.
It's about trusting yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that takes some soul searching and some maturity. And were you wearing the mask, as it were, with Quark? Did you find it easy to look at yourself week after week? Did you find it easier?
You know, I had the same. I watched your interview with Andy Robinson, and I had exactly the same experience that Andy had. Early on, I was taking a pee in my trailer, and there's a mirror right over the toilet, and I went, "Oh, you're an alien." You don't have to act an alien. You just are an alien. You look like an alien. And the mask helped.
It's freedom, isn't it?
It's great freedom.
It truly is. And, you know, you can do, frankly, quite a lot less because you're screaming more anyway.
Yeah. And you don't, they'll accept you. You know, Westmore, who was the makeup artist, once he made you up to look like an alien, everybody will believe you're an alien. And if you had, I have to put a plug in for Karen Westerfield, my personal makeup artist.
Right.
Her artistry was so good, the camera could come right in.
I loved I did notice that your red eyes, from one side of the light, they're not red at all.
Right.
And then you just flash into the light and suddenly they, it's quite remarkable.
And that's Karen's contribution.
Right.
That was not Westmore. That was Karen.
Like a bird of paradise, is it?
Yes, she looked in my eyes the first day and said, they're rather blue. I'm going to put scarlet around them so that they'll pop out more.
Oh, wow.
And she got into a raft of shit for doing that.
Did she?
She got into a raft of shit for that. But they had already shot it and they couldn't change it.
Oh, brilliant. And I'm talking about lucky again. I mean, that is, I don't mean to be funny, but, you know, those eyes are, and the teeth, of course. And,
the teeth.
God bless those teeth.
You bless them. I'll just.
Did you wear contacts at all?
No.
They're your eyes. They're right. They are your eyes. Yeah.
My blue eyes. Yes.
Yeah, they're massive stuff. All right, another question.
Okay, next question is from Nina from Patreon. What is your favorite rule of acquisition?
Enough is never enough. I've only recently started to learn them. I had to learn them for each episode, but Max was quite brilliant and knew them all by heart and can just spout them all off. But for years, I think my favorite was the first one. Once you have their money, never give it back. And if I may say something about the rules of acquisition, people always said about my character, in the beginning anyway, and perhaps later on as well, that he was the least moral person in the cast, or the character in the cast. And I would beg to differ. And the reason is, Quark had those rules of acquisition, which he lived by.
Yeah.
And it may not be your 10 commandments, but it was his
prepared
10 commandments.
Right.
Prepared to die for the rules of acquisition.
Right.
I mean,
and so what is morality? Is it not following principles that you believe in, that you think are right? In Ferengi culture, those were 10 commandments, the 250, I think, 250 rules of acquisition. So that's my way of looking at the rules of acquisition.
I kind of got this idea when I was watching some of your episodes that Quark was kind of the Tony Soprano of the underworld on the station.
I could see that.
I'm not sure he had that much power. I'm quite sure he didn't have that much power. But he hoped to be Tony Soprano.
Right.
There's
a character in English TV, Del Boy, Only Fools and Horses. He was a small-time crook, really, and but always dreaming of being a millionaire.
Exactly.
This time next year, Rodney, that was his younger brother, we're going to be millionaires.
Really? And I'm very happy to say that since Deep Space Nine has gone off, Quark has done very well, I understand. He's got a franchise of restaurants, and he hasn't got a moon yet, but he's working.
I've gotten drunk in Quark's bars around the world. I know that much.
How much do we charge you?
A little high.
Do you know, I drink for free when I go to
Do you? We have to cut that out.
Another question.
Okay, great. Jill Sheets from Patreon asks, what was your favorite thing about playing Quark?
The people I worked with. They were wonderful actors and very good people. And because we were in some sense a family, we didn't always agree. But they were superb people to work with. And when we know that, at least I believe, for an actor, all life comes from the other person, from the other actor. And I had such wonderful people to bounce off. And of course, for me, at the top of the list is Renee Aubergenois. Others very close, but Renee is at the top because I had to get over my awe of him at the beginning because I knew Renee as one of the princes of the American theater. And so the fact that I was going to be working with him was a little intimidating. I got over that pretty quickly.
Yeah,
That's so
actors.
cool.
You know, you've ever eaten with one?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Bird O Prey 5 from our Patreon asks, I heard the Federation is like root beer exchange between him and Andy Robinson, Garrick, wasn't in the original script and either added late or ad-libbed. Is there any truth to that?
There is some truth to that. There is, yes, some truth to it. So let me explain what happened there. On one of our weekend meetings, Andy and I were looking at this root beer scene, and he was the serious Machiavel, and I was the comic Machiavel. And we began to think there's more to this exchange, the subtext, as Andy pointed out to you, and certainly we would all agree there's subtext in acting. We began to think about the subtext of this particular scene. And as we worked on it in my house on the weekend, we began to have very definitive ideas about what we were both communicating without saying things. We went to work on Monday. Jim Conway was the director.
What was he now?
Jim Conway. And as I said earlier, we presented the scene to the director, and he got a little cross-eyed, and he said, "That's not funny." And we went, "It's not a funny scene." And he said, directors get their marching orders from the producers.
Right.
And he said, I can't shoot it if you do it that way. Because he'd been told whatever he was told about how to shoot this scene.
Right.
And it's the only time in the 7 years that the little Ferengi stood up on his hind legs and said, well, I'm not going to do it that way.
No kidding.
I'm not going to do it
Wow.
that way. And he rightfully, very smart, said, then we'll have to bring the writer-producers in to see this.
They don't like that.
No. It's a long walk. It's a long walk.
Even in the golf cart.
Yeah, it's a long.
That's at least 30 minutes.
So our showrunner, Ira Bear, and I think Robert Hewitt Wolf, yes, was there and came in and said, what's the problem? And we explained the problem. And Ira was not happy about this.
So they'd written it ostensibly as a whimsy scene.
Yeah, whimsy, comical, and we were supposed to get laughs from it.
Right.
And Ira said to me and Andy, well, show me what you want to do. And we did. And then he said, can you at all do it the way it was originally written, the way Jim wants you to do it? And Andy and I are very good actors.
They threw it to Jim.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Andy and I are good actors, and we said, yeah, we can do it. and we did it. And Ira conferred with the other writer, Robert, and turned back. Couldn't have been more than 20 or 30 seconds. Turned to Jim and said, "Do it Armin's way."
No kidding.
Nice.
And so, no, but I haven't finished yet. So we did it. They saw it in dailies. They liked it. And like the BioShock, they came back and we shot it again with a slightly different script.
Right.
More leaning towards what is the eventual scene.
Right.
So we didn't ad-lib. God knows, I don't know about your set. But no, we didn't ad-lib. That
On
was
your life.
verboten. I mean,
Right.
the best thing you could hear after you did a shot was to turn to the continuity director, and our set would say, "DLP Lubby, dead letter perfect."
DLP. That's the first time I've heard that.
And they did rewrite it so that it catered more to our interpretation of the scene, and that's the final scene.
Wow.
In the context of that episode, because I've seen the scene, but I've not seen the episode, I don't think. What is the context of that root beer conversation?
Sure. So what happens is Starfleet, our people who are in Starfleet have gone out to fight the Dominion, and they've left the station without, our series regulars. They're all off on a mission. And so Garrick comes into the bar, and we begin to talk about Starfleet, and he suggests they're a little like the taste of root beer.
Right. These humans. And,
But yeah.
Yeah.
And I think my character says, it's a little off-putting in the beginning, but after a while you grow to like it.
Yeah.
But there's more to it as well. There's not much more, but there is more to it where we're sussing each other out. This is the subtext about we're not going to really say we like Starfleet, but we are depending upon them to save our butts in this battle.
Right. Right.
Lovely.
Yeah. That's funny that you had to fight for that scene because that's one of the most iconic scenes in Star Trek.
It is.
The definitive scene.
Thank you, Mark. And we're very proud of that. And I don't know where I got the chutzpah to stand up to the powers that be, but I'm very proud that I did. And I got lucky.
It was late on in the series, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So,
What a scene partner to have.
Oh, yeah. I'd known Andy for a very long time. Andy directed me in a play for which I won a nomination for a big award here in Los Angeles. The Birthday Party by Pinter.
Was it at the Matrix?
Yeah.
Yes,
wow.
yeah, right.
Andy worked a lot, as you know, at the
Great
Matrix.
play,
I
isn't
worked
it?
at the Matrix quite a bit. My wife worked at the Matrix.
Right.
Some of our best friends are from the Matrix. Andy and the actor I mentioned earlier, Gregory Itzin, were a tag team. They worked together. I can't tell you how many plays they did together.
Who did you play in the birthday party?
I played Solomon.
Yes, right.
Gold something.
Goldsmith?
It wasn't Goldsmith. Goldman?
Goldman?
I can't remember. But it is one of the two heavies that comes in.
Good part.
It's a very good part. And I obviously must have done a good job because they nominated me for an award.
So you played American or
No.
did you? No, you went British. Good for you.
I could
You went London Jewish Cockney.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, if you ask me. I am an actor. I can. There's several accents I can do. I do voiceovers. Did
I mention that?
Did I mention it?
What's Andy like as a director? Pretty good, I would imagine.
Andy's very good.
Yeah.
Andy's very good. He both lets you be on your own and then nudges you just when you need to be nudged. And has his own ideas about the play, and just a wonderful director. And we are very close friends. In fact, Irene called Kitty yesterday.
Right. Yeah, he's become a good buddy since we started doing this, and we met, and then he came on board to do it. But I'd known him a little bit at the conventions. I only met him recently at the Doctor Who one down in at the airport in the last year and a half, 2 years.
And he's a phenomenal, as good an actor he is, and he's a phenomenal actor.
He really is,
He's just an even better director.
Is he now?
And he directed, I think, 1, maybe 2 episodes of our show. But as a theater director, there was a period of time when he was, without a doubt, the #1 Los Angeles director of theater in Los Angeles.
And he's still doing
That's
it. He's
fantastic.
just about to
Yes.
strike up the band again.
Yeah.
Another question?
Yes. Shannon Brown from Facebook asks, I know you are well versed in Shakespeare.
How do you know that?
Which Shakespeare character does Quark most closely resemble?
Hamlet.
Oh, look at you.
Lovely.
Well, come on. You've got to go deeper. I mean,
And why?
was it a mother thing?
No, that's all I'm going to say. In my mind, Quark's Hamlet.
He's Hamlet.
He's certainly the Hamlet in my career.
Oh.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, okay. I mean, now I follow your raison.
Mark Amon from Patreon asks, he does not ask. He has a comment. My partner makes me put on a Quark episode to make her feel better when she's not feeling well.
I thought you were going to say
I
something
don't know where
else.
this was going to go.
Yes, I've seen that fiction.
You too?
Thank you for a lot of memorable episodes.
Well,
Sweet
I'm
mom.
glad your wife, partner, appreciates it. That's who we did it for. We did it, as I said earlier, we wanted to give you the best performances that we could possibly do. And it's nice to hear that after 25 years, people are still appreciating it.
That wraps up fan questions.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you very much, all
Thank
of you.
you.
Yeah.
It's the three of us against Mark, who is the Oracle.
Oh,
And
okay.
has seen every episode of everything 50 times. We rarely win.
We tied last week, didn't we?
We did tie last week.
Yeah.
It was a moot call. I think one or two of the.
Okay. So and there's 5 questions, okay? Question number 1. In TV's original Star Trek series, how did a salt shaker serve as a prop on early episodes? A, Kirk used it to make a captain's log. B, McCoy used it as a medical scanner. C, Sulu used it as an orbit injection lever. D, a red shirt clutched it while freezing on a planet's surface.
Well, Connor said it
That was
first,
Connor,
but
yeah.
do you
I mean,
know?
I don't,
Okay.
but it sure sounds like a salt shaker.
That's what I would say.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's go with the salt shaker.
The answer is B.
B, you guys got it.
All right.
Yay, one point for you guys.
Well, this is a rare. This is
Enjoy
a
that.
rare event.
Lucky, see? Lucky.
Yeah.
Question number 2. What do the Vulcans of Star Trek have to do every 7 years? A.
Mate.
Oh, 2 zips. Bonfire.
Time out. No,
Yeah.
I mean, what do we? Okay.
Should we go with another?
to get disqualified for that.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm so sorry.
No,
Go
I'm
ahead.
not going to disqualify you.
Yes.
Well, we all know that answer. Go for another question, I guess.
have the point.
Yeah, he gets
Oh,
it.
really?
He's our
Okay.
guest. Guest gets it.
At least I knew it was Bonfire. Look at me.
That's right. That's
Deal with
right.
that.
That's right.
Encyclopedia, mate.
2 points for you guys. Question number 3.
It's been a while.
Question number 3. Which of the following people hasn't been an artificial or cybernetic being at some point in their lives? A. Data. B. Hugh. C. Dr. McCoy. Or D. Captain Picard. I mean, you both
I have
came
no
in
idea.
before.
Give it to Mark. He's been gracious to us. He's been gracious
Go
to
on
us.
then.
Let's
Is it
go.
McCoy?
I'm McCoy.
Yeah. It is, isn't it? Yeah. He was a boy.
Yeah, he didn't want to put the makeup
All
on.
right, 2-1.
2-1. Question number 4. What is the ritual every Vulcan has to experience to prove themselves removed of all emotion? A. Kolinar. B. Katin. C. Kobayashimuro. D. Kaswan.
Done. Oh, he beat me. It's A, isn't it? It's A.
He did beat you? Okay.
He did. I think so. It's A.
Oh, okay.
2-2.
2-2. Well, this is it. Tiebreaker, guys.
At least I know this stuff.
You're not disqualified. Question number 5. What was the name of the Deep Space Nine space station before the Cardassians were forced to leave?
Don't say anything. Yeah, don't say anything yet.
Nope. Go ahead.
Gotta go.
Keep going. Keep going.
You know it.
I haven't given it. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
A. Empok Nor. B. Dukat Nor. C. Tirok Nor. D. Union Command Post Bajor.
Mark.
Clark.
Family holdback. I'm saying it again. Come on, let Armin answer that one. I mean,
Do you know it?
Sure. It's Impact Nor.
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, no.
Mark.
No.
Mark.
Tarek Nor?
Tarek Nor.
Shut the front door.
You know yours is Tarek Nor.
We were this close.
Yeah, I heard the first one. I went, oh,
That's the
it's
one.
Tarek Nor. Yeah, Tarek Nor.
Well,
Oh,
is
wow.
that 3-2?
Wow, that's it.
And now we're playing Stuck on an Island with Connor Trenier. Connor?
So here's the deal. You're on a deserted island, and you are allowed your favorite author, their complete works. You are allowed your favorite dessert.
You get Shakespeare.
If you like, you get Shakespeare and you get the Bible.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's already, it's like being in Motel 6. And your dessert, like ice cream, you get all ice cream. Your music, all of their work, a particular one. And then the cuisine, French, Italian, yada, yada, yada. So who is your author? You.
I was going to say that.
I was going to say that, actually.
It can't be you.
No, it's very simple. Hilary Mantel.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Same vein, but
Better.
She's a good read.
Yeah.
God bless her.
Your music?
Grieg, I would say.
Oh, sorry.
Music?
Yeah, Grieg.
Oh, Greek music.
Not Greek. Grieg. Composer Grieg.
Oh.
He's a Scandinavian composer.
I see.
Say his name again?
Grieg.
Grieg. Oh, Grieg.
Grieg.
I thought you said Greek.
I did too.
I did.
And I was like,
That's what you wanted to hear.
Cuisine?
I'm like, Greek music.
Genre.
Cuisine. What's good for me? What's opposed to what I eat and what's good for me? I would say Thai.
Oh, okay. That's the first time we've heard that one.
Yeah, I think so.
And then your dessert.
My wife's pear cake.
Oh.
Well, we have to decide if she gets to go with you or not.
Is it an upside down one? Or
Well, if she doesn't get to go with me,
You're not going.
I'm not going. You can keep your Shakespeare and your Bible
And your silly little island.
and your silly little island.
it's only Catalina anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You're close by.
Yeah. They make a great lasagna over there, those salty dogs. I think that's all she wrote.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's been a hell of a
Lovely.
conversation.
So nice to have you on the show with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Armin.
Thank
Great
you.
to catch up and dig in a little bit.
And thank you for allowing everyone to, to present this situation and to give people this opportunity to share time with you and me and
Thank you,
everybody
man.
else.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
We're having a lot of fun. And
we have
Oh, yeah.
we have a gift.
Oh, we do.
We do. A gift from my wife, actually. Yes. From me, from you.
Mm.
Oh,
That's awesome.
Thank you. This is going directly to Kitty. Who,
Are they real?
oh
They're
my
real.
God, they're quite beautiful.
yeah,
Thank
beautiful,
you.
very beautiful.
Whoever is responsible, and I think I know, but whoever is responsible, thank you. She deserves it. My life would be exponentially worse if I wasn't married to Kitty Swink. And that's another lucky thing altogether. And I'm just
That's
so lucky to
beautiful.
have her. And she is, she's a force of nature.
She's quite
Yeah, let
someone.
me
She
put
really
those-
is.
Well, thank you, Armin.
Yeah.
It's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure, mate.
Yeah.
It's just been a joy hearing all your stories.
Thank you.
And
And some of them are true.
now we haven't
That's a
got to
need to
the
know basis.
Have we got the contract? Is a contract? Is a contract? And that's all she wrote.
Like, subscribe, and join us on Patreon.